Well, hello and welcome back to the Leverage 3 podcast. I'm Craig Shoemaker, and today's guest is Tyler Todt. Tyler is voted by Forbes magazine, Popular Mechanics, and my Twitter feed as the most popular guy on Twitter. Tyler, welcome to the show.
That's a pretty awesome intro. Maybe one out of those three are actual facts, but I'll take it, man.
Well, that's what we can strive for, right? We'll get there.
Right. The 2 out of 3 dentists approve. 1 out of 3 of Craig's recommendations is actual factual, man. I'm honored to be on, brother. You're a guy that I've connected with pretty early on, man, in my journey. Yeah. And I think a lot of you as a man, as a dad, as I'm already learning things from you, even as we chat off the podcast. So I'm really honored to be on here, man. Thanks for having me.
Dude, that means a lot to me to say that. When I started the show, truly, honestly, one of the first things I thought of was like, if I could just get Tyler to come on the show, that would be like the coolest thing ever.
Well, let's make some magic happen, brother. Here
Absolutely. So when I think about your life, your story, your positioning when it comes to being in public, it's kind of a story of juxtapositions. You're this Christian that spends a lot of time in casinos. You are prominent on money, Twitter, but you're not trying to build a huge empire. And I'm just curious, what's it like sort of straddling some of these opposing forces?
That's a great question, man. And something that I think I've always grown up with sort of like an addictive personality. And so I come up with a lot of strategies around this. I do a monthly audit on myself just to make sure I'm still aligned with where I want to be. And I pray. I'm a very big proponent. I wake up every day. You asked me how I started my day. 4:50, man. I'm up pretty much every day before my family. I try and get in the Word every day. Pray a lot of songs and fellowship with God. And I always start there. And so I just pray every day that there's a little less of Tyler and a little more of Jesus in Tyler. And so, I do get hate sometimes from people telling me, Christians shouldn't be in tank tops as much as you are, shirtless, or shouldn't be playing poker, or, things like that. And, ultimately it's my walk with Christ. And if, I'm actually on a 30-day poker fast, which I've called it,
wow,
as I did feel myself kind of going a little more towards that. And so I recently, this is day 6, just said, hey, God, I'm going to take that time, about an hour or 2 a day that I normally play or study the game, and kind of give that to you and see if maybe you have different plans for it at this season. So always try and be very intentional about where I'm putting my best energy, my best focus. And I think doing a monthly audit really accomplishes that. Another couple things I do is before I go to bed every night, get on my knees, pray, and just ask God to search me, let me know the directions he wants me to go. I map out where a lot of my next day is going to go and where I want my best energy to go. And so being really intentional, not being on autopilot, man. We just see too many people that kind of wake up without a plan, right? Well, what are we going to do today? I don't know. Whatever comes. How are we going to feel? I don't know. Whatever comes. And I want to be the opposite of that, man. I think I want to wake up with a pretty specific mission every day, go inject positivity, life into everybody I'm around, and be really mindful of kind of my goals and where I want to get to.
The word intentional is so powerful and so meaningful. And it's something that's kind of stuck with me even since my college days and being with my friends and trying to sort of have a life that's not, like you say, just something that you go from moment by moment and you turn around and you just realize where did it all go? I mean, I think it's such a powerful thing to really focus in on what it means to be intentional.
I definitely agree, man. And I used to think, 5-6 years ago, if you would have asked me, I would have said, well, my boss will dictate how this day goes. That the customers or clients or people I interact with, that'll determine whether I have a good day or not. And I think somewhere along the line, I just, I felt like kind of a tug and God saying, hey, man, read the Bible. Look, I didn't make most of these people's lives easy, right? I'm not saying you're going to have an easy life, but you always have a choice of how you respond and the kind of person that you're going to be each day. And it doesn't mean we're going to be perfect, but it means we can always strive to just be a little bit better. I think that's my goal every single day, just be a little bit better.
So let's dive into this poker fast for a second, because I mean, that's part of how you support your family, right?
Oh yeah, man. It's about 20 to 25% of my income. Yeah.
So that's not a small amount.
No.
So I'm curious, you must have some pretty interesting stories about games that were maybe going one way and took a sudden turn, but then you ended up pulling it off in the end. What have those experiences been like for you?
Crazy, man. So yeah, really, I guess a little backstory. When I was 20, I deposited $60 into an online poker site at college. And I turned that into about 60 grand within like 6 to 8 months, and just realized I had a knack for this. And so started studying, buying books, dropped out of college, much to my parents' dismay. The next year, I think my GPA went from 3.7 to 1.9 once I discovered poker. Because I just
role model of the year.
Yeah, man, my parents were not stoked. And now that I'm a dad, I think about my kids coming home saying, I'm going to change career courses. And so
right.
I was a professional poker player for 9.5 years. That's the only income I had. And then when I got married with my wife and we had our daughter, I decided I'm going to go back to college. So I went back to college and then did the corporate thing for 5 or 6 years. But poker's always been a part of it. Paid my way back through college. I was playing while I'd go to night classes and be in the back and playing a little bit, and getting notes. And so it's always been a part of my life. For 19 years, I've had 1 month that I've lost money at poker, and every other month I've won money. So I've been like a model of consistency. And I'm grateful for the game because it's really developed a mindset for me of, you mentioned when bad things happen. Well, in poker, a lot of times, man, I can think the biggest pot I lost of my life, I was a 93% favorite to win $33,000, and he hit the 7% card, and I lost, and I had to push over $33,000 of real money to an opponent. But I'll never forget, man, that was 7-8 years into me being a poker pro. And
right.
I literally told the guy, hey, man, great hand. I went bowling with buddies that night, never talked about it. Nobody knew I had lost that money and so you have to just sort of say and develop that mindset again of, I can't control the outcome of a lot of things, but I can control my process. I can control how disciplined I am. I can control how I react. So I'm grateful for poker that it really taught me that. And I think even with social media growth, right? Like, man, I felt this tug to start posting on Twitter 38 months ago. I had exactly 0 followers, right? And so for 4, 5, 6 months, you're tweeting in a wall. I mean, I would put tweets out and I think, oh, this is a banger. This is going to go. I would check back 4 hours later at work and nobody liked it. And so I'd go like it just to get one like, and it really developed that, okay, I can't control who might like it, who might click follow, who might unfollow. But I can control that I tweet 3-4 times a day. I can control that I engage. Here's the processes that I can get obsessed with and kind of control. And that's led to, here I sit 38 months later with 110,000 followers on Twitter and just crazy things, right? But I think if I hadn't developed that early on with poker, I just would have quit. And I think that's what most people do. 2-3 months in, they have this vision of where they want to go. It's a couple months in, you're not seeing much fruit. But life's kind of like that, right? It's like you got to put in a lot of work and you might step forward, step back. Then all of a sudden you get this massive catapult. And so poker helped me develop that, I think, in life quite a bit.
A lot of this comes down to mindset, and there's so many different directions I want to go based off of what you just said. But I think it's interesting. So you were a professional poker player. You made it to kind of the upper echelons of that sort of game. You accumulated a lot of wealth. I know that, you started buying some things and started living that life a little bit. And I'm just curious because there's this cliche that says money doesn't buy happiness, right? But having no money is really uncomfortable. And I'm just curious, knowing that you've been at, the different sides of the spectrum on this, how do you interpret that for yourself and for others?
Yeah, I think it's really, okay, if you have no money, there's a season that you need to grind, right? Like if you're a dad and we're literally talking, you're having a hard time paying mortgage or rent or putting food on the table, there's a time to put your head down and go drive an Uber at night after you work all day. My father did that. He was my dad when we were 8 or 9. I remember, I think Jimmy Carter was president and interest rates literally went from 8% to 22. And to keep our house, my dad had to work all day, come home and roof houses at night and do side jobs every weekend. And that's how our family kept our house. Now, that was a season. And when I think back to my childhood, the thing I always think is my dad was there. He wasn't like a workaholic. He was there. But I think every man, you have to have a basic level of I'm going to provide.
Right.
But let's be honest. Most people listening to this podcast, most of the people we know in our circles, we are far beyond that point. To us, wealth looks a lot different than it looks to most people, even around the globe or even 100 years ago, right? Like it's
Right.
accumulating a lot of stuff that we probably don't need. And so, when I got really into poker, as a 21-year-old kid, I made $340,000 that year. So you pay 120 in taxes and you've still got a lot left. My rent was $300 in college, right?
Oh my gosh.
I had a lot of disposable income.
Right.
And I bought myself a brand new sports car, and I took a bunch of great vacations and bought a fancy watch and all this stuff. And I did that for the next probably 6 or 7 years. And what I really came to realize from that, and even being in the circles I was in, I wasn't near the top of poker. I was a couple rings down, but I knew most of those guys who were, one guy in particular who was worth about 50 million from poker, and he was 30
that's
years
all.
old. Yeah, 50.
Yeah.
And one of the greatest players to ever play the game. And I was at a nightclub with him. I remember when I was like 27, 28, and this table that we had at the nightclub cost 50 grand. And then he covered it for everybody. The dinner we went to before with about 16 people was a $9,000 dinner. Just the stupidest stuff you could ever imagine, right? And I remember going up to him at 3 a.m. I might have been intoxicated, a couple drinks, and I said, brother, like, you made it. You made it, man. Like, you got he had an $800,000 car. It was like one of 100 custom made. This guy had everything, right? In my eyes, as a 27-year-old guy, he had everything.
Right.
And I will never forget what he told me at 3:30 in the morning. He looked me dead in the eye and he said, all this is nothing. He goes, Ty, I was happier when I was grinding low stakes. And he goes, listen to me when I tell you this. There's a nightclub conversation at 3 a.m. He said, look, he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, look, I always told myself I'll be happy when I make 100 grand. I'll be happy when I make 500. If I just become a millionaire, I'll be happy. If I just get to 5 million, I can buy the car. I got freedom. I got I'll be happy then. 20 million, 30. It's never enough. And he said, if you're not happy with where you're at right now, you can buy a temporary dopamine hit of happiness when you buy the car, when you buy the watch, but it goes away. And you got to have something bigger in you. And I watched him quit poker not that long after we had that talk, and he moved away. He was a TV guy on all the time. You don't see him anymore. He got married. He's got a bunch of kids. Occasionally he'll post something with riding his dirt bikes with his kids. But I think once you get to that level, you hear guys like Jim Carrey had a famous quote where he said, I wish everybody would become rich and famous and accomplish all their dreams so they'd realize it's not the end all be all. There's a reason we see celebrities that are miserable and a lot of these people that quote unquote have everything. And I think I got to experience a little bit of that. I had all the nicest stuff and everybody was telling me, man, you should be really happy. And I wasn't happy. If I'm really honest, looking back in my 20s, it was always, I'll be happy when. Right. I got a $60,000 car, but my buddy's got a $200,000 car. I'll be happy when I get that. Right. Yeah. And I think that plagues a lot of people, especially in our consumer type of society. And what changed my life and opened my eyes, I'm super grateful, Craig. I know I've talked to you a little bit about off stream, but is my wife. She's the smartest person I've ever met. She's got a PhD from Purdue, came out, graduated, and she was ready to make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, getting recruited by all these companies. And she felt a tug from God to go take a mission trip. And she did. And she went and lived over there after that for 6 months, made connections with preachers and other people on the ground, started a nonprofit, didn't get paid for 5.5 years at that nonprofit. Just felt the calling. She walked dogs. She babysat. She taught a little bit here and there just because she felt like that was her calling. A lot of people called her foolish. What are you doing? You could be making all this money, right? Yeah. But now I look back at 17 years later, the kids that she started with in 2nd and 3rd grade, and I've been on 6 mission trips with her now. They've graduated college. Their whole lives have changed, right? She's changed the lives of these people. And I look at her and I say, she's the most fulfilled person I've ever met. Not because we got the fanciest stuff, man. You see my background. It's we got Picasso's hanging on our wall, man. We really don't. We don't make a ton of money in comparison to a lot of the people I know. But man, I will put our peace and our joy and our contentment and our laughter and all that up against anybody, because I don't think we chase kind of the same things anymore.
Well, okay. So this leads perfectly into, I don't remember if you and I were having a one-on-one conversation or if it was something that you did in public, but you were talking about how at one point you were set, like you had this plan, you had this vision of, okay, I can take my coaching business to like this next level and I can do this, that, and the other. And then was it a mentor? It was one of your friends that shared with you the story of the Mexican fisherman.
Yep. Dan Go is his name on Twitter. But yeah, okay. Dan, he's a fantastic, he's a business coach. That's what he does. And I was trying to hire him to help me scale my business. And,
can I give you some money? I mean, come on.
I was trying to, man. Hey, man, I have a lot of clients booked out, but I'm only one guy. What do I do? I'm making, let's say, $6,000 to $8,000 a month, but everybody else is telling me with the following I have, I should be making $60,000 a month. And I started to see these things, right? And so I hired him, and he ended up not even charging me, man. He's such a great guy. But what he did was just ask me a lot of these questions. He said, hey, Ty, why'd you want to get out of corporate? I said, I don't want to run meetings. I don't want to have people reporting me. I don't want to do that, He said, well, what would you do with the extra money? I said, probably donate it,
Right.
I don't know. We got paid off cars. I don't know, What are you willing to work 10 and 12 hours a day whereas now you work 2 or 3, That would mean a lot less family time, a lot less of the things you preach. You got to understand that. And once I really started to think about it, it just clicked, man. I have everything I want right now. We don't have the fanciest stuff, man. Again, I barely wear shirts. I threw one on.
I barely wear shirts.
Hop on your podcast, brother. But I don't think I bought myself a new shirt or new shoes or fancy stuff in decades, man. Some of the shirts I wear are still old T-shirts that you get when you donate to a charity. They send you a shirt.
Right.
I drive an 8-year-old car. Those things don't. This is a Zuby bracelet, right? I sold my watches. I used to have a couple fancy watches. They don't mean anything to me anymore. And so, what means the most to me, and when I think if most people really took a step back and you asked them what really makes you happy, it's not having a $40,000 chandelier in your house. It's not driving a super expensive car. That's what society will tell you. But what really matters to me is having time with my family. Having time to take my kids to the park every day, having time to being able to pick my daughter up from school and take her straight to dance and cheer her on and be that dad, right? And so even having time to hop on something like this with a guy that I admire and respect like you, that means a lot to me, And so I think everybody needs to start to ask themselves those questions. By the time we're 18, man, Craig, we've seen 100,000 commercials. Programming, the guy with the Lexus and the mansion and the watch, he's happy, Is he really? He's working 90-hour weeks to get that stuff. He's in debt up to his ears. Is he really happy? Yeah. So I think we should all ask ourselves these questions. What really makes us happy? And then start to cut the lifestyle and start to understand that a lot of times buying this stuff isn't it.
Yeah. So, and I think our culture informs us in ways that oftentimes we're not aware. And so I'm curious, even having that North Star to shoot towards, right? What do you do when uncertainty creeps in?
It is right now. If I'm honest, this is a good time to talk through in real time. This would be therapy for me, man. So because we have one outstanding debt right now. Interest rates are going way through the roof, right? And again, we're comfortable. It's I could probably not work or bring in income for several years and we're still going to be able to eat, right? And pay bills. But as a man, you always got that raises up, right?
I can do better. I can do more.
Right. And so not being able to log on and just play poker and win money when I kind of whenever I want, right, has been a challenge. And it's been a thing where I think I need to even give that over to God and say, again, what's my North Star? You mentioned that. What's my rock? For a while I made my rock status, money, parties, things. That's sand, man. That's quicksand. That goes away. But if my rock and I say, well, who am I really? I'm a child of God. Well, God says in Matthew, look at the birds of the air. They don't know where their meal's coming tomorrow, but I take care of them. Do you not think I love you more than them? And so that's my rock. And that's where I'm always going to go back to, just to trust God. And, ultimately I wouldn't have given up the poker had I not had this deep relationship with God and really felt the tug to be honest. It started with a guy in my DMs, a former professional baseball player who just challenged me and said, man, you posted a lot about Twitter lately. Or about poker lately on Twitter. Have you, are you getting back into it? Are you this? And I started chatting with him a little bit. He's a really interesting guy. And that night I had a dream about giving up poker. I started journaling about it the next day. And I really felt a tug from God. Maybe you are putting a little too much emphasis on your talents, on your abilities. Maybe you need to lean into me a little bit more, So that's where that came from. But yeah, ultimately, if it's not God and a deep relationship with something bigger than yourself, I feel like it's just quicksand.
I think that's the hard part. For me, it's the hardest part about leaning on something that's not yourself, because we've all been given a number of gifts and abilities and proclivities. And, like what you're modeling right now is to say, I have this faucet that I can turn on and a lot of water can come out of that faucet, but I'm choosing to turn it off right now. Like, it's just so much easier said than done to be able to actually do that.
Yeah, and then it creeps in like, look, if I don't play for 4 or 5 months, I don't know that I can keep winning, right? Because it's like one of those things you have to kind of keep getting better at, or so there is a definite level of trust and faith in it. But ultimately, I have to go back to, I've always said, like, look, even with my Twitter, if God told me tomorrow, I felt like, hey, man, I don't want you on social media anymore, I'll make one video and say, thanks for the ride. I really want to live with that kind of faith, because I've driven my own ship. I've captained my own ship to many different avenues and thought this will bring me happiness, peace, joy, contentment. Nothing has, except Jesus Christ, if I'm very honest, except a daily going back and surrendering to him. And so if I really want that kind of life, man, to me, it's a pretty easy choice. It doesn't seem easy from a distance, probably, to just make less money, right? But yeah, I think if I don't start everything in my life with faith and center from there, my marriage isn't as good. My presence isn't as good. My joy isn't as good. The people I'm affecting around me, it's not as powerful. I mean, bro, I prayed for 1,000 followers on Twitter and said, hey, God, could I impact 1 or 2 people? Could I maybe sell a few ebooks and retire from the bank at 60 instead of 62? You know, that's what I prayed for. And to see what God has done with that, again, hundreds of thousands. I mean, I do 15 million people see my tweets every month now, which is just mind blowing. The impact. There's not a day that goes by I don't wake up and have somebody in my DM saying, man, like, that message is exactly what I needed for my marriage, for my faith, for my fitness, for my habit, whatever that is, right? And so the impact has just been crazy. The financial blessings through Twitter have just been unbelievable, man, to be constantly booked up with one-on-one coaching. And I don't even advertise this, man. I didn't even set out to be a coach. I just have people show up in my DMs and ask me to coach them around mindset, marriage, fitness, health, habits, right? Like, I've been booked for 3 years straight on this stuff, and I don't advertise
How long?
it. Yeah, 3 years straight. I haven't had a lull, not one month.
Crazy.
And so I have to go back to look. If I look back at the history of my life, I gotta trust God, and I gotta start there, right? Otherwise, what's even the point?
I love that. I love every single bit of that. Okay. You've made a shift. You've been the captain of your own ship for a while. What color was the chair that you sat in the day you quit your corporate job?
Oh man, it was a big chair. I was in, brown leather, big chair.
Big brown leather chair. And what was that conversation like for you?
It was awesome, man. It was a miracle. So at that point, I had I wouldn't say first, but one of many miracles. I'd had many conversations with God recently. So we were in the pandemic and
quit your job in the pandemic. No big deal.
Yeah. I was tasked at that time with staying pretty late and helping a lot of our small business customers. So there were several nights around there that I was leaving at 5:30 in the morning and getting home at 9 at night. And I had about 25,000 Twitter followers. I was coaching 4 or 5 guys on the side. I knew I had this ability to play poker and make more money. And so every day, pretty much on my drive to work, I'd beg God, is it time? Can it be time? I'm ready. I'd cry some of the days in there, just knowing I'm going into this job that I didn't really love, but I felt like God had me there. And I thought it was to impact somebody. Like, well, there's got to be some client or somebody that's staff member that I'm supposed to impact. So I'd go in there with a good mindset, do my best every day. And I thought it was for that. Coolest thing ever, brother. 2 weeks before I quit, one of the guys that gets transferred into my branch, his wife just so happens to be really high up in DCFS. My wife and I are fostering children at this time. We've had 3 or 4 in and out of our house that we were privileged enough to reunite back to good homes. And she tells me, I got this boy, his name's Kingston. He has a lot of medical troubles, but if you guys would be willing to take him, you could probably adopt him, right? He's got nobody speaking up for him. So we take him and he becomes my first son, and we do adopt him 6-7 months later. And about 2 weeks after that happened, that we got Kingston, my assistant manager came up to me and basically said, "Hey, Ty, we love having you here. You're a really fun boss. You let us play basketball a lot and take walks, all these things. But it just doesn't seem like your heart is here. Like you don't, like when you're working and talking about these other things you're building, you're more passionate." And this is somebody who's lower than me. So it took a lot of courage for her to come up and say that. And I knew at that moment that was what I'd prayed for. God gave me that sign through her. And so I did. I texted my wife right after that and said, "It's time. I'm going to call my boss." I called my boss. It was not received great, to be honest.
I can only imagine.
He said, "Hey, man, once you go down, you'll never come back up. I don't think you should do this." And, and I said, "Hey, man, I ended up working another like 8 or 10 weeks till they could fill my spot." I said, "I'll come in and do my best still every day, but this is something I feel called to do,
Yeah.
That particular boss never spoke to me again, still hasn't to this day. but
that's not cool.
Some corporate guys are like that. Most of the other people received it really well in my company and were congratulatory. And I thought I was nuts. Like, you're going to go do Twitter. I don't think that's a job, Tyler, but,
right.
It's worked out extremely well in the way that it should have. And I really felt like, again, trusting God with that, because I was ready to quit. Again, I had the clients, I had all these other things.
Right.
But I never would have adopted our son, had I not been faithful and stayed through that last couple months of that.
Well, and that's how we connected, was the thread that you talked about, the adoption, your adoption story, which, resonated with me so much because my daughter came to us through a situation to where, the birth parents were not able to care for her. And we ended up adopting her after a lot of, as you know,
I know how that goes.
A lot of stuff. So I have such a heart for people who step into that space and face the things that you have to face, to know that there's kids in vulnerable places that don't have the love and the care that they need. So, I feel akin to you for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, same. I think, people that haven't been through that foster and adoption don't quite understand the heartache. My wife and I hopped on a call with a guy that I coached a couple of years ago just this week, because they're getting into it. And some of those feelings, it's a very unnatural thing, right? To have a child be taken from their home and you raise, you're so sad for those parents.
Yeah.
You're sad for that child, but you want to be a part of the solution and help. You'll have other people chime in and maybe not say nice things, what they've heard in the past about like foster homes, or you're stealing kids and things like, like you hear a lot of negative stuff in it. But I think when you want to just be a part of the solution, right? My wife and I said, how can we best change the world? It's change the life of a few kids, right?
Yeah.
And take them out of that situation. I know you guys have done the same, and it's a very rewarding thing, man, that I don't think people that have been outside of it, it's really hard to connect with them on a level that, say, we could connect, because we've both been through it. You know?
Well, and it's just, when a child is vulnerable and put right in front of you and you already love them, it's like, how do you not do that? Like so it's 100%. Beyond me, the difficulties that some people place in that situation. But okay. So, I'm going to change subjects a little bit here for a second.
Let's do it.
How's Uncle Elon doing? And when you guys are at the barbecue, can I come? Man,
that's been pretty crazy, dude. So he's commented on a couple of my tweets in the last few weeks, and then he liked another one here the other day, a response that I had to one of his. So I went full on for it, man, yesterday, and just put a shout out and said, "Hey, Elon, let's quit dancing around this." Like, we've obviously got something here,
That's
right?
Call me, maybe.
That's right. Call me, maybe, man. So I volunteered my services to be the chief positivity and mindset officer at Twitter. I would spread joy and positivity.
Dude, do we need that?
I just thought, they rigged the algorithm for so long, and he's exposed a lot of that with the Twitter files now, that they literally rigged it to suppress a lot of some of these viewpoints. And I don't really want to get into it, but I thought, let's rig the algorithm for joy, man. Let's rig the algorithm so everybody's seeing, like, they wake up, they log on to Twitter, and they're happier. Like,
yes.
How cool would that be, man? So, it's been really neat. I think Twitter and social media in general, it's just so cool that an average dude just like me, that just a dad and, doing his thing, can have access to the richest guy in the world and can actually have a couple back and forths with a guy like that.
Right.
It just shows the power of social media. I mean, even you and I, Craig, if you really think about it, 50 years ago, brother, there's a 0% chance we would have known each other.
Never.
You were just you knew your coworkers, you knew your neighbors.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, if they sucked, if they were negative, that's what you had, man. That's just all you had. Now I can go online. I can build community with people all over the world. I can find like-minded dads, husbands, Christ followers, and I can connect with those people. I can pour into them. They can pour into me. I don't take that gift lightly. I think that's such an amazing gift that we have nowadays.
And that's such a good, a powerful point, because what's the cliche? You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? So now, because of the connectedness of our society and the availability of social media, like I can choose who those 5 people are going to be.
Yes.
And that it makes such a huge difference.
It's so, and we tell our kids, as a dad, like, look, my daughter's 7.5. I'm already I hear all the things you think you'll never say as a dad, you end up saying. Yeah. I mean, I'm telling her, like, if you hang around those kids, you'll end up like those kids. You already hear myself saying these cliche things, but I think as adults, we almost forget that sometimes, and we really are. If I hang around, and I did it, back in my early 30s, I hung around a lot of guys who went to the bar a lot and watched sports and complained about their wives.
Right.
You know what I ended up doing? Going to bars a lot. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And now that I surround myself with these guys that are just, call it higher vibration, whatever you want to be, they have this growth mindset of, I just want to be a better husband, a better father, a better Christ follower, all these things. Man, that injects into your mind. I mean, again, Proverbs, as a man thinketh, so is he. Let's put those inputs. Let's be very mindful of those inputs and who we're allowing to come into our mind.
All right. So I have one more like cautionary tale question, and then I want to make sure we end on an up note. But you've had the opportunity to coach dozens, maybe in the hundreds of people. And I'm curious, no personal details, nothing like that. But are there patterns that you see? And I'm looking for something maybe different or deeper than all the stuff we've already talked about. But are there any patterns that you see among the people that you spent time with that is just self-sabotage? Like there's just mistakes and things that they do over and over again.
100%, man. I've been privileged now to coach. I think I'm nearing 300, to be honest.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Clients. Yeah. But if you count group coaching and some other things like that.
Yeah.
Number one thing, man, is a self-limiting belief. Always. And so I had this for a while. You know what, Craig? I'm just not a morning person. You know what, man? I'm just full of anxiety. That's just who I am, right? I just don't like that thing. Okay, man, how long are you going to continue to tell yourself that? And when I really look at it, what I think that is the enemy just telling you who you are, right? And so now, brother, I shout back. He who lives in me is greater than those voices that you're telling me. I just preached my first sermon on David, man. And oftentimes that giant, which is Goliath in his case, but in our lives, I think that giant is in our mind, right? And it's telling us all those self-defeating thoughts. You're just trapped in this marriage, man. There's no way out. You've got a roommate marriage. This is how it's going to be. Your wife is negative, and that's how it's going to be. That's it. You're done. You're just stuck at this job, man. You're not good enough to do anything else anyway. You can't pivot out, man. You're comfortable. Just stay in there. Everybody, you're close to 40, man. Everybody gets fat when they're 40, right? Like it's just who you are, man. It's just what happens, right? And once you start to identify everything I believe is a choice, every single thing I choose to believe is a choice, you can start shouting back at that voice, and you can start saying, you know what? I may not be a morning person today, but tomorrow I'm going to get a little better at it. And you know how I'm going to do that? By proving to myself over and over and over again. And I always say, each decision we make, man, every decision point is a vote for the person we're going to be. And we're getting 1% better with that vote or 1% worse. And you have control of every vote of that. And so, a lot of times you see people too that I coach, that self-limiting belief is one. And then two, I don't know if I coined this, but I'm big on it, is just stacking wins and little daily non-negotiable habits. So you see a lot of these people that will come to me and say, I lost 40 pounds, but I put back on 50. And then I lost 30, but I put back on 20. And I've just yo-yoed for a decade. And so, okay, let's identify a lot of your daily patterns, a lot of your daily habits, and add little things in that are very enjoyable to you. So, again, if I'm trying to get better at fitness, I don't want to only eat vegetables and things I don't like, because that's not very sustainable, right? So I need to find foods I like and I enjoy that are also healthy and make that a lifestyle. I don't like to run. I'll be very open. I don't like it. So I take a lot of walks and I play pickleball and tennis and frisbee with buddies. And that's how I get my cardio in, right? I create a lifestyle around things I like. If I'm coaching guys in marriage, right, and they just come and say, again, that self-limiting belief, I'm stuck. I had one client come to me, Craig, and said, me and my wife haven't been intimate in 12 years. We haven't so much as kissed in a decade. We're complete roommates, and that's just who it is. We've both basically said our youngest kid is 13, and in 5 years, we'll get a divorce. We're staying together for them. That's how he came to me, right? And so again, we started to break down his day. Where did his best energy go, right? Well, he felt validated at work. So he put a lot of his best energy into work. He'd given up in this other area. So we just started to change the tiny daily little habits, just thanking her. That's all we did for the first month or so, just saying thank you a lot more. I appreciate you. I see you, leaving a little note here and there, right? Then 3.5 months in, like this guy, I'll never forget the day he called me and he said, skyrockets in flight, Ty. We're back, baby, But it's not this magic pill. It's the little daily habits, right? And I think that's too often humans, we overestimate what we can accomplish in a day or 3 days or 5 days. Well, I went to the gym for a week and I only lost 1 pound, so I quit.
Right.
I was nice to my wife for 3 nights. Well, yeah, bro, she knew you only wanted sex. That's the only reason you were being nice to her. So,
right.
But if you have a longer term vision, we often underestimate what we can accomplish there. And so I challenge a lot of clients to take a 6-month, take a 1-year vision with me, dream with me in that way. Where's your life going to be in a year? I have them write a letter to themselves often. This is where we're going to be in a year. And then we reverse engineer it back and we say, what's the daily habits we can do to create that? It's a pretty powerful exercise for them.
It's funny. And this is the second conversation today that I've had about starting with the end in mind and then working your way back. Totally different context, the exact same tactic though. It's awesome.
A lot of successful people do it.
Yeah. So, all right. So usually what I do is I close the show by asking for 3 tactics that people can employ based off of what we've been talking about. But you just gave me 2, which is awesome. So you read my mind of where we were going to go next. So if we were going to land the plane, what's one last thing that you would want to leave people with?
Man, solve your why first. For me, at age 34 and a half, I kind of had a second awakening, a sort of revival, where I realized I wasn't being the guy that I could be. I was 20 pounds overweight and I hadn't lifted weights in 2 years. So it wasn't muscle. I was laying on the couch watching football all day, going to bars a lot, and just really had a thing that I wasn't being who I wanted to be. And so I remember getting out a journal that night and I wrote down why it was so important that I change a lot of these routines and habits. And the thing that I wrote and I identified for myself was ultimately, I don't want to get to the end of my life and say, well, what if? Who could I have impacted if I had been on fire and lived my best life? How different would my wife and our marriage be, right? How different would my kids view me if I was this on fire guy? If I actually did what I said I was going to do, how different would my life be? I'll see if I feel like getting up for the gym tomorrow. I don't really feel like doing this thing today. You cancel that out when you identify a why. And when your why is stronger than those feelings, you're not going to be motivated always. But if you have a deeper sense in something bigger than yourself, it's very much easier to stay on that upward trajectory because momentum's really powerful. You can let that why carry you through.
Hey, thanks so much for being a part of the show. Let's continue this conversation. Feel free to connect with me on Twitter where I'm at Craig Shoemaker. So go out and have an amazing day. I hope you get a chance to find someone to love, find someone to forgive, and find someone to encourage because we are most certainly not in this alone. And I'll see you again here soon on the Leverage 3 podcast.